Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Keis. He's the foremost global authority on behavioral assessment strategies, processes, and an expert in leadership, purpose, and wellness. He's authored over 4 million words of very pertinent content, including 500 articles, 4 books, and a dozen assessments to help others realize their full potential. He's the president and CEO of Consulting Resources Group International, and I am honored to have you on the show today, Dr. Keis.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Art, and be able to serve as best as we can.
We'll change some lives because our backgrounds are very similar in a lot of ways. Can you tell us your story?
Well, I'm here in Canada, in Vancouver, so don't hold that against me, though my brother-in-law lives in Seattle, so we have lots of fun. I am 8 minutes from the U.S. border, so I just call myself a cross-border guy legally. So with that, I actually grew up on a dairy farm. I am the 3rd generation, firstborn male, Eastern European descent. So after I finished agricultural college, I went and joined my family farm. But after my dad and I were beating on each other daily in arguments on how to run the farm, I left a couple of years after that. So I started my own dairy farm, but I went into agricultural sales and also worked for the Department of Agriculture. And when I was in agricultural sales, or actually, let's go back, I was in the 4-H program and was successful in that as a youth program in the rural Canada. I even knew at 16 that I wanted to be a speaker, but I didn't really know how that was going to manifest or show up. So in my late 20s, I quit my sales job and started my sales training company. And in fact, as we record this show, Art, this is my 30th year in this industry.
Wow, that's a long time.
And it was interesting. So I moved into doing the sales training, coming from being a sales professional. That went well. And it's interesting as you think about serendipity or, just God's hand, if you want to call it that, which I believe, is I met Dr. Terry Anderson, who founded Consulting Resource Group, a couple years later, and he was in the same community. And he founded CRG because he wanted to create assessments that were for the learner to really help them improve their relationships. So it's not something I did to you, it's something I did with you. And so anyways, I met him at a chamber event, and 2 weeks later, we joined forces. I hung out as vice president of marketing for him and his company. And then I was blessed in 1992 with a project to work with Chrysler. And a year later, they asked 6 people back, and I was one of those 6 people. And then we had the sole source for all the soft skills for Chrysler. So with a partner, we developed all the leadership, all the customer service, all the communications. And it was at that time we were using, personality assessments, et cetera, sales assessments. And I was very blessed, but I was on the road 300 days a year, Art. And I know you do a lot of work around relationships. Well, it nearly cost me my marriage. I had 2 young children. I did call home every day. Now, when I started in this industry, Art, people don't know, but we're on Zoom. We are recording this. We're seeing each other as we chat. This didn't exist 30 years ago. I flew and commuted from Vancouver, from the West Coast to Detroit for a year, every week, because we didn't have internet. And so I was the program designer. I had to physically go, and people were working on this thing called Apple, Mac, and developing the programs. But after being on the road 1,500 days in 6 or 7 years, it nearly cost me my marriage. So I was thankful, and don't take it the wrong way, but after 9/11, the next week, they canceled my contract. And we had 12 full-time people that were working for us. And really at that time, my profession switched from really a speaker who was writing to a writer that speaks. So I went and I bought CRG, which is our assessment company, and we have tools on wellness and leadership and self-worth and values and job fit. And I moved into it. I spent 10 years rewriting the content of the assessment company, which I bought from Dr. Terry Anderson, who founded it. So it was interesting how that single meeting that had happened nearly 28 years previous had led into, and now I purchased CRG in 2002, and how many years later, 17 years later, here we are. And, for those people that are listening, Art, In grade 9, my English teacher said I would not amount to anything. And the reason being is I couldn't read or write. And I discovered when I did my master's degree that I was dyslexic. So there was this creation called the computer where I could type and little red lines would appear underneath or other suggestions. By the way, your grammar sucks. And so as a result of that, I started to write. I was writing on the computer. And it's interesting, I never at 16, 17, 18, 20, 25 even, would have ever thought that I would be a writer. And it's one of the things that I enjoy. I enjoy speaking to large groups the most, and just the energy and the interaction and the ability to serve people in that context. But after that, I just really do enjoy writing.
It's really interesting to me that how the transition over a period of years like that bring you to your purpose. And when you really find your purpose, no matter how much you've been discouraged by other people, when you find your purpose, it starts a fire in the soul and it grows. I didn't find it till I was 63 when my wife passed away. And
so, Art, what is your purpose?
My purpose is to help others and teach others about expectations, to use their expectations.
And interesting enough, my purpose is to help others to find and to live their purpose. So in 1989, when I got into the speaking industry, what was interesting, this was way before coaching was big, but a friend of mine in Seattle referred me, says, Ken, I think you're trying to figure out who you're supposed to speak to about what. You know, I knew I was supposed to be a communicator and an encourager of others, and I enjoyed that. Even as a teenager, I was the person who was the MC at all the community banquets because I was the person who could lead and do a good job as an MC, have some fun with people, make sure that the event was positive. But I was still searching through, what was my purpose. And so I hired a coach, and I drove 2 hours each way every month for nearly a year. And his name was Mike McManus, and he was an educator in Seattle. And he really created a program to help kids stay in school. But what he discovered is most adults weren't living their purpose. I think it's the saddest thing, Art, is that our highest level of contribution is when we're in our purpose, not from a self-centered point of view, but from a self-honoring point of view. And it's not that, you're just doing it for yourself and you're narcissistic. No. We get energy. And I can't explain it, but when I'm on the stage, I just finished doing all the speaking. We're talking off air before we started. I was in Texas speaking in Houston and San Antonio and across the country. Is that when I was in those audiences recently, I've been doing this for 30 years. I was never more energized than when I was doing that speaking for those groups. And it was interesting, after 30 years and 3,000 paid presentations, that it actually was more energizing than the first time. Says something. And my encouragement to everybody that's listening is that every single person has a purpose. And if you don't know what that purpose is, then your purpose is to find your purpose. Don't get guilty. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just simply go on a journey. That's one of the reasons I wrote my latest book, The Quest for Purpose, is to help give people a framework in a step-by-step process to be able to determine, what am I supposed to be doing? So life leaves clues, but the challenge is most people aren't paying attention. And we are amusing ourselves with social media, but we're not developing ourselves. And so how can I back away from that and just start taking ownership and saying, what is it that I like? And if you can't figure out what you like, then you can go the other side, Art, where you say, what do I don't like? What I don't like. And so you can say, well, I don't want to be doing that. I know that I'm never going to be an airplane mechanic because people would die. It just wouldn't go well. It's not an interest of mine. I mean, could I do it? I suppose. But the reality is that's not what I'm destined to do. I can't explain why when I'm in front of an audience, and the bigger the better, that I am just energized. It's just a fact. Just as you found your purpose to help others, to encourage others. And thank you, Art, for your work to serve individuals and couples and people to go to the next level, because I think it's the saddest state when people are miserable and down.
Yeah, it brings me down.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
I have found that I actually function better in small groups than I do in large groups, though I do like speaking to large groups, but I really love interaction when people can get up and close and we can talk and exchange ideas and everything. That's where I really flourish, which is, we're all different. And that's what I love about all of us. But how much do you think fear stops people from doing and finding their purpose?
A lot, actually. Fear and worry is a significant player. If you actually listen to people's language, the fear of everything seems to be out there where there's a statement I had on social media, fear is not your friend. And the majority of the things that we worry about never come about. Mm-hmm. I tell a story in my book about one of my staff members. She was a single mom, and I get that, and it's just very protective of her 16-year-old son. But my kids grew up in a high school where they had a drag racing team. And so my son and my daughter were both chosen for the team at different years. Oh. They're doing 120, 130 miles an hour, maybe faster at the end of the track. And so my daughter in the second year, and she's not even licensed to drive on the road, had the fastest lap in 5 years on the team, 120 some miles an hour at the quarter mile. And so my staff member said, I would never let my son do that. And I said, well, why is that? I said, well, he could get hurt. And the reality is this fear was driving, because she had sort of lost that relationship. She was now overly protective of her son. And that fear was hindering probably some opportunities that he could do, that he could engage. And I'm not saying that, we didn't take care of the safety issues with our kids and helmets and all those stuff. But if you live in fear, you are not going to realize your potential. It's just not going to happen. The other one is that's happening now is this worrying, which is sort of another side of fear of what other people will think. Because here's the reality. Every single person on the planet seems to have an opinion. Very few people have wisdom. And so the last person you want to ask about, trying to quit your job and start a new company is somebody who's never done it. So we go and we ask people around us, or we get opinions, or we get feedback, sometimes unsolicited, of course, from people who have never gone down this path. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have valuable opinions about certain things. Example is, the last person that I really ask about how to parent is somebody who's never had kids. So I'm thinking about one of my relatives who's never had kids. He's now 70. How he talks about kids, how he interacts with them it's obvious he's never been a parent. Now, there are many people who are parents who you shouldn't take advice from either, just because they're a parent, because it's a job that you can get without applying for it. But the point being is that, are you getting advice? Are you being mentored? Are you being coached? Are you getting feedback from people that have been there and done it?
We see that more and more on the internet with life coaches, and particularly here in Texas, because we do not have a lot of licensing laws. Anybody can go out and hang up shingles and say they're a carpenter, whatever it is, psychiatrist. I mean, really, it's very footloose here on that. But on the internet particularly, I see so many people that are out there espousing ideas that they really have no idea of what they're talking about and what they're doing to other people. A lot of the business consultants that are out there have really never owned a business, but you can say anything on the internet, really, and it's very dangerous, I think.
Well, I know that you do a lot of work in relationships, and it's interesting how, and again, I have to be careful how I say this, but people go to get feedback or support from other people who have been through, let's say they've been through a separation and you are struggling in a relationship. should I really go to somebody else whose relationship ended in a break, or should I go to somebody who was able to reconcile? Point being is, what were the steps you went through, Ken, to be able to reconcile? So I'm thinking about friends of mine who, she actually wrote the book, My Husband's Affair Became the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me. And so they were on Oprah 2 or 3 times. Now they actually run marriage seminars on betrayal. Well, I think they have a little bit of credibility because they went through it themselves. She wrote a book on it. And now they teach other couples how to really overcome this traumatic event that has occurred in their relationship so that they can reconcile. So that would be an example of credibility, within the marketplace and people that are living it and able to serve others in that space.
I totally agree with that. I think sometimes the practical experience of going through an event, trauma, any number of them that are events that happen in our lives, having gone through it is actually more of an education than going to come. I've learned far more outside of the academic world than I have inside of it.
Well, even though I have my doctorate degree, Art, I call academics the abyss. And, practicality, a lot of times there's not a reality check in those spaces, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree. You wrote a book and you titled it, Why Aren't You More Like Me? Tell us about that. I really love that title.
Well, when we think about one of our expertise as a company is we have our own personality or personal style assessment. And our belief is this, is that every single person listening to this show has a different personal style or personality. And what that means is we call it your natural preferences. So there's some people, no matter what, they're always late. They just don't seem to have consciousness around time. There are some people, no matter what is going on, they're always early. And then there's other individuals who love to tinker around things in mechanics, but they don't like people. And there's individuals that they just love people, but they never get the things done, right? So this is where you come on over to my house, but that they haven't cleaned in about 7 years, or other individuals who have cleaned every 7 minutes, but, don't touch anything so it doesn't get out of the way. So we believe that personal style, and in fact, there was an independent study by Talent Smart. Why aren't you more like me? Here's the premise, is that all of us are uniquely wired at birth. Now, we ask the question, are you nature or are you nurture? So are you born a certain way or does your environment shape you? And our answer is it's both. And so we have several factors that contribute to my personhood and who I am and what I prefer and what we believe. And this is why a very high percentage of people, we believe, dislike their work from mildly irritate to loathe, is the nature of the work is not aligned with the nature of the person. So personal style or personality is different than purpose, Art. Purpose is this overarching sort of philosophy or vision. So for me, if my purpose is to help others find their purpose, my personal style or personality is how I go about doing it, how I like to go about doing it, and how I like to live life. We believe that my life is sustainable and energizing if I'm in a role and responsibility that matches the nature of who I am. If I'm in a role that isn't a job fit or isn't a personality fit, then I can't sustain engagement. So Gallup did a study and said out of 142 countries, only 13% of the global workforce is even engaged. We get into some Asian countries, it's 5 and 6%. The highest engagement is in the US and Canada at 29. So still, 70% plus of people dislike what they do. Now, there could be other things around interests. And let's go back to your other comment about fear. A lot of times people love the certainty of misery versus the misery of uncertainty. They rather stay with this miserable job because I've got a paycheck than leave it and try and find something else that's more fulfilling. And I think that's a disservice to all of us, especially the person. So personal style, even from a parenting point of view or from a couple point of view. So we tend to, not always, but in a lot of cases, we marry opposites. And so what attracted you to that other individual that was engaging, that's awesome. And now that's the number one irritant in your relationship, right? And so I might not be detailed oriented. They are. They need lots of time to plan. You're spontaneous. You just want to go to the movie now and you're deciding, and while you're putting your jacket on, as you go out the house, what movie you're going to go to. The other person says, well, we need to look at all the reviews and what's the possibility and where are the different shows and which theater we're going to go to. It's a full day event to decide which movie to go to. So part of what we're trying to teach in Wired to More Like Me, not only do we want to have self-honoring, saying, who am I, and own my space, because a lot of times when I was growing up, my dad always criticized me for talking too much. Now I actually get paid to do it. So one side is to honor self from a self-honoring point of view and accept self and to validate self. The other side is to really understand the differences in people. So I love your show's name around expectations. And a lot of times is people get frustrated, angry, or upset or hooked with other people because my behavior didn't meet your expectation. Is that somehow or other you were supposed to be doing something differently. You're supposed to do it quicker. You're supposed to do it slower. You're supposed to do it this way instead of that way. You're supposed to do this. And so usually we get upset or hooked, or even things like road rage, right, is because somebody didn't do something the way that I expected them to do it. So, even Andy Stanley talks about this, is that a lot of conflict in relationships, in fact, most of it is around unmet expectations. The problem is that most people don't have the same expectations as you have for me, or they're not aligned to it. So what I'm teaching you in the book is how can I accept and understand others? And we teach a step, and I say this is the most difficult human being action. We teach you to suspend. In other words, nobody offends you, nobody upsets you, nobody creates this irritation on you unless you let that happen to yourself. You are 100% responsible for your response. And I said, oh, people hate that. They dislike that. It says, no, you made me angry. No. I made myself angry. I decided, I'm not saying that what they did was okay or was appropriate or is even right, but my response is always in my control. And the problem is most people practice being irritated. You get upset with your computer, you get upset with your car, you get upset with technology, it doesn't work. And so we're practicing this sort of negative response. And then we bring that into our relationships and we wonder why people don't like us or we don't get along with other individuals. So this sort of interpersonal skills. Now, the whole research around the importance of emotional intelligence is all over the map. And that's what Why Aren't You More Like Me is about, is, what is your emotional intelligence? What are your social intelligence? I'm actually quite shocked sometimes, just the lack of interpersonal communications, emotional intelligence that many or most people don't have.
Yeah, I'm huge on emotional intelligence because you can't manage yourself if you cannot identify your emotions and what your feelings are and do it accurately. And a lot of what I do around expectation therapy is working with building confidence in your decision-making process and accepting responsibility for your expectations and how you manage them. We're a lot about management, which is exactly what in line with what you do. It's about managing what your processes are and what your thoughts and how you express them, which is beautiful. I mean, I think it's the key to happiness.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
If you can learn how to manage your emotional intelligence and your feelings and identify them and stop trying to change somebody, because you cannot be responsible for changing anybody except yourself. Any feelings on that?
Don't get me started. That's another hour show. Mort Fortel wrote the book Marriage Fitness, right? And one of the things he says, the number one error in partners is trying to change the other person. And the reality is we can't. Now, if I'm an employer and I'm trying to manage my employee and help them to update their behavior. I get that. But generally in life, we can't change any other person. And trying to change the other person actually creates a significant amount of stress in the relationship, because this goes back to your expectations. So part of the purpose of the book, Wired to More Like Me, is to move into this acceptance and even to get out of self-centeredness and say, what does art need from me now? In other words, I'm not changing my personhood, because we believe your personal style is something that's consistent throughout your lifetime. It doesn't change. My personality or totality of whom I am does, because of maturity and education and spirituality, all these things. But my preferences stay consistent. And here's why this is important. I can count on me being me tomorrow so that I don't have this sort of chaotic mindset. But on the other hand, I also get to know art. I says, what does art need from me now? So in other words, do I need to slow down so I can build relationship with art? And so we teach this concept of credibility, and that credibility is behavior I do and also behavior I don't do. And every single person listening to the show has a level of credibility with everybody you know, if you want it or not. Your credibility is set. It's the price you pay for showing up. So as a boss, as a friend, as a significant other, as a parent, as a child, whatever context it is, every single person on the planet has a level of credibility with the other people that they know. The reality is most people don't know. And as you talked about before, one of my colleagues, Tasha, who's written a New York Times bestseller, Insights, self-awareness is most people are not self-aware. So you'd love this research. Tasha did research for her book, said what percentage of people believe that they know themselves, Art, and how they see themselves and how they show up is congruent with how I see you. So 95% of the population, so those of you listening, 95% of you believe that you know yourself and you know yourself well, and how you see yourself and how you come across is congruent or the same as how other people's opinion about you. But here's the reality. When she had her students go out for a year, just guess what percentage of people's perception of self-awareness was actually congruent with how everybody else saw them. What do you think the number was?
18%.
You were close. It's 10%. 10%. So 85% of individuals are delusional or misrepresent or really don't have a clue about how they are seen by others or how they show up. So they are not self-aware. And of course, we have two additional steps, which you've already alluded to, and that is self-awareness is step one. So I'm conscious and awake of what I'm doing or not doing. But the next two are self-management. How do I manage self, which is what you were teaching? And then number three is self-mastery. How do I actually develop this muscle to a point where I can actually be in control of self without even thinking about it? I've developed this sort of Olympic athleticness, if I may, around this managing myself and my responses, etc.
One of the things that I really resonated with you is when you said that 10% of the people are delusional about it. Do you think that it's because we have become accustomed to lying to ourselves?
Well, I never really thought about it. A lot of times, I think people don't know that they don't know. And I do believe, and in some cases, that it's more important about how we look than how we really, really, really feel. In other words, we have this persona, right? This sort of fraudulent self, and being sort of open and authentic is not there. I mean, even if we think about social media and what it's doing to people, I mean, the millennials, and by the way, I'm a parent about two millennials, so I have some authority on this, that generation is the loneliest and most depressed in history. And part of this whole thing is this persona online about what do I need to look like? Do I get enough likes? Do I trying to get this dopamine hit? And that's why mindfulness or self-awareness or just being grounded and centered is coming back because, well, there was a study done, sorry to jump around here, but in China, 400 million people are addicted to their devices. So if it's video games, if it's their phone, even myself. So people that are listening, if you're listening to your phone, keep it on. That's fine. That's perfect. But sometime in the next week or two, take your phone and set it aside for 5 hours. I mean, you are, in a lot of cases, if I lose my phone because I do my business on it hard, it's a traumatic event, right? It's like, whoa. So to be able to take that phone and set it aside. Now, as parents, we figured this out fairly early. Now, not everybody would agree with us, but our kids, right up until they left home, or until they graduated high school, their phones could not be in their rooms overnight. So we took the phones and they could be plugged in outside, in their bathroom or whatever, but they could not have their phones in their room overnight. I remember once when we forgot that, and our son, he had like 250 texts in that one night alone, just between friends at 2:00 in the morning, right? So this is ridiculous. So you need to get your sleep, get out of that place, and turn your notifications off, because it's such a distraction for you to be able to even focus. And if you're in the working world, we know that once you're distracted, it's take 10 to 15 minutes to get you back to the same concentration level. So you are never optimizing your performance.
Mm-hmm. We're so addicted to our devices now that I'm not sure. I don't know very many people that can put their device down for 5 hours. I mean, I go to church and I see people in church texting. And I'm not talking about millennials. I'm talking about adult people, that just can't get off of it. It's become so ingrained in them.
Well, of course, many of us use it for, if somebody has a Bible app or whatever, they're on it for that. And the next thing you know, a text comes in. So, of course, you're going to respond to it. It's just sort of the nature of the beast that your whole life is sort of controlled in this one device. I didn't do email on my phone until a couple of months ago. And just because I travel a lot, it was just easier to have it on the phone to try to boot up my computer in the middle of an airport, which might or might not connect to Wi-Fi. So I get the convenience. I understand that. But we also want to understand that when you're addicted, the first thing is to admit that you're addicted, right? So if you're an alcoholic, the first part to trying to get off of that is to say, I'm addicted to alcohol. So, well, no, I'm not addicted to my device. Okay, we'll set it aside. I would say that it would be difficult for me, Art, just because I'm connected to it all the time for business purposes. But I can't use that as an excuse. I should be able to take that on a Saturday or Sunday. Life is not going to pass me by. Set it aside and away you go with it.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you before we run short on time was that when you were telling me your history, you had mentioned that, as I think you said,
my grade 9 English teacher, yes.
Do anything. That is a real issue with me, because I was told the same thing. I wasn't going to amount to a hill of beans and all that. And it wasn't because I wasn't able to read like you were. And with dyslexia, I commend you for really overcoming it and achieving. But with me, it was the status of my family in the community. And when I do your show, we'll get into this in more depth. But It was the status of my family in the community. And I was suppressed across the board. And what my question is, did you actually find power in that teacher telling you that? Did you work harder to achieve, to prove?
Well, I think in high school, I really did struggle with my self-worth a lot. I was the rural kid in a city school. Now, we were a very small town. 25,000 people, but I still came off the farm. The rest of the kids were mostly from town. Even when I went to agriculture college, my behavior was acting out because I wanted to be liked, right? So you try harder instead of just being comfortable in your own skin. You're needing approval of others. So, when we do this show, my dad is still alive. He's 87. He'll never watch this or listen to this, so I don't have to worry about it. But to this day, he has never told me that he loves me. Now, I know that he does. In Eastern European culture is that you don't verbalize that. Now, what I do is I sick my son and daughter on him. Say, hey, Grandpa, we really love you. You're amazing. And, they just tell him that they love him all the time. And then Grandpa's actually almost awkward. He's almost sort of struggling with that kind of receipt. Now, his mom was very critical. I knew my grandmother a little bit before she passed away. His dad died when he was 16. His eldest brother died when he was 17. So he hasn't had an easy go to do it. So when I got older, I start to understand, my dad really doesn't even know how to manage his emotions. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like at 16 to kind of have your whole family turn upside down. However, it still has affected me. And, we all of us have sort of this family of origin that comes into it. So my encouragement is, and I think, Art, what you were trying to say too, is never underestimate the power of an encouraging word or a discouraging word at any time in any person's life. is because, especially if you're in a place of leadership and they're vulnerable in some form or another, is I think a lot of times people underestimate the influence they might have. I just actually did some podcast recordings yesterday, or before we're recording this one. And one of the individuals who's now a registered psychologist, he said, you know what? A grade 10 teacher saved me. My family was dysfunctional. Dad was angry. It was abusive. But this lady believed in me. And in fact, he's now in his 50s and he still remembers the name of this teacher as one of the single people that was encouraging him and helping him to go to the next level. And so now he's written a book and been successful. And as you and I are doing, helping other people to sort of realize their potential and see what's possible. And we would do it for free, but it's just our calling. It's what we're supposed to do. So I would just encourage everybody that's listening out there, if you're a parent, just never, ever go to say to your kid, you'll never amount to anything. You can discipline behavior. Said, you know what, Art, you're doing that to your brother's not okay. But you don't attack Art's personhood based on a behavior. This is like communications 101. But most of us, when we get angry, we want to attack that other person. And that does sort of disclose a lower self-worth or a lower development level of that individual.
Yeah, I'm huge into labeling. We wear and live the labels that are placed on us. And you have to really be careful of how and what you say to people, particularly children, because they take it in and suck it in and they begin to believe. It's their belief system that gets assaulted or nourished is the other way. I mean, it goes both ways. There's kind words and there's harsh words. So I think it's really, really important. I mean, teachers, I hear all the time, well, they address their students well. So-and-so and so-and-so are going to be the leaders of the group, and
well, even, we have another assessment, a learning style and instructional style, and we have a program, why don't you teach the way that I learn? So, it's based on the work of Why Aren't You More Like Me? In my son in grade 8, he's a very verbal, outgoing individual. The teacher was beside herself. Well, her style was one of control and compliance. Well, here he is. He's grade 8, 12, 13-year-old boy going through all these things. I don't care. I mean, the boys are different, regardless of what other people say. That's the biological truth. And as a result of that, of course, she's a new teacher, so she's trying to control him. He's trying to talk more. He was almost 6 feet at that time. And he says, Dad, if she says another word, I'm going to pound her. And so that's how frustrated he was. And so I was actually, now get this, I was a chair of the school board. So I intervened in what we did is we had a meeting and started to help her understand the more that she was trying to have him be compliant and control, the more that was frustrating him. The more that he was being outspoken, the more it was frustrating her. And so he came home about a month later after the meeting. He says, Dad, I've learned something. He says, what's that? He says, I've learned how to shut up. And we also helped her to understand that his engagement level is being verbal. Well, now, at 24, he's a very successful realtor, one of the youngest realtors in the marketplace, doing very, very well. And his communication skills and engaging and networking with others is the core of his success. So the teacher could have really crushed him. The other thing is my wife's a teacher, and when we were working with our kids and studying, my son needed to study with somebody else because he was so people-oriented. My daughter, on the other hand, if you came into her room, she would just get angry with you because I need my own private space. I need to study in my own way. I don't need you. My son, on the other hand, if we didn't get involved, he would just have procrastination forever. So we knew this about personhood. We knew about personalities. We knew about different learning styles. And we addressed that. And so both of them have been very, very successful individuals as young adults. But as parents, if we didn't know this, I'm not sure how that would have affected them.
Yeah, and most parents don't know that about their children. Most parents can't assess like you have the ability to assess both the teacher and themselves, and facilitated or mediated an agreement that they both could come to make it happen. Because we see it all the time in the school system where these kids get sent to detention and, because they're acting out. And a lot of times it is because we haven't set up a system. Even the counselors don't know.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
Can you give us any quick tips for assessing students like that and teachers?
Well, of course, obviously I have the bias that why aren't you more like me? Get the book. And in the back of the book actually is a free assessment. So our personality assessment is included. It's complimentary. It's normally $45, but part of it is people are leaving clues. We use our model. So we use a thing called introversion and extroversion, but it's not what people think. It has nothing to do with people. Introversion and extroversion in our model is how I see the environment. So extroverts try to tell the environment what to do, want to be in control of it, and are not intimidated by it and need to engage it to feel alive. Introverts, on the other hand, are more compliant to what the environment asks, and they are more reactionary or responsive. There are some people who are task-oriented and some people who are people-oriented. So which is it? Meaning, are they mostly around the relationships or are they mostly around what they're doing? And then the last one that we talk about in this criteria is around, are they verbal or nonverbal? Now, what we mean by that is the amount of language they use, both spoken and written, to communicate something. So if a person is extroverted and nonverbal and task-oriented, then that's what we call our behavioral action individual. And so people are constantly leaving clues. I teach in the book, one of the chapters, on how to read other people. People are, within 3, 4, 5 minutes, you already know who that person is. And so we've set up a framework. We call it translating or reading others. And we give you a system to be able to do it. And you can know who those people are pretty clearly. Then we also have definitions of the 4 different dimensions that we have. Now, most of us, or almost all of us, are blends of it. That's where I disagree with some of these other personality assessments and why ours was created, is that the majority of us are a blend or a combination thereof. So there are some people who are both introverted and extroverted. This idea that some people are one or the other. No. Some of us are actually quite balanced. And some of us are quite balanced between task and people. I am. So even though I love an audience, I also can sit in my office for 4 or 5 hours writing something on my own, and I don't need anybody else around me. On the other hand, I could be in an audience of 1,000 people and speaking, and I quite enjoy it as well. And so this sort of self-awareness, our model helps people. So we really focus on the development rather than testing and trying to put you in a box. I really dislike that idea, is that I get to have this consciousness about self and then go from there. So I know this is the quick way to help the audience, and it's a 5-hour seminar that I just did in 4 minutes.
Boy, my head is just going. I mean, my brain is going, because when you were speaking, I was thinking about, well, I'm a little bit of all that, and I'm very blended in that.
And part of when people complete our assessment, we actually have one of our profiles is that you're blended with all 4. And many of the other assessments, actually, what they do is they say, if you're blended and you're balanced between all 4 of them, they said, well, you don't exist and you've obviously completed the assessment wrong. And so we get angry with that. And we said, that's 5 to 10% of the population. And then we have another one where 3 of our dimensions are blended together. So when we add those 2 together, over 30% of the population is actually not even represented or honored or validated in many of the other tools that are out there, like DISC or Myers-Briggs. And so that was one of the reasons we created it, is we really wanted to honor the diversity that people have out there. And as you said, are you allowed to be blended, Art? Absolutely. And I also do believe this, and this is my spiritual, my faith spot, is that you are perfectly, your personal style is the perfect combination for the assignments that you have been given or your purpose in life. So I don't think there are accidents. And, either you believe that there's something bigger going on or there's not. And my encouragement that there is, and that you have the perfect personal style. If we're all the same, imagine, somebody who's got to be an auditor for an accounting company and just has to dive into numbers and Excel sheets for days, being people-oriented. That's not a fair expectation. Or I take this person who is this analytical person, and now I'm going to make them the PR person for a company. That's not really a fair expectation of them, because every day their water glass is empty. It's not nourishing them. It's draining them. And so they shouldn't feel guilty about that. They should just really be conscious about it and then be intentional and deliberate in their career path and their relationships and their roles. I do believe that personal style or personality assessments should not determine a career, but it does determine the nature of the role within the career. Meaning there's all kinds of style of teachers. There's all kinds of style as far as speakers. The reality is how I go about doing it is uniquely mine. And that needs to be honored.
It brings to thought with me, here in Texas, we have what is called the STAR test for assessing grade levels and development across there. And what we have, or what I have seen more and more of, is the teachers here are teaching to the STAR test and not teaching to the individual student. In other words, the teachers are actually rewarded on the percentage of students passing the STAR test and not on the actual growth that the children are receiving and education they're receiving. And I think that it's really sad because...
Well, think about your show name, Expectations. What's the expectations given to the teachers, right? The expectation is the more that these people pass, the better the job you're doing. So we shouldn't be surprised that their behavior is following sort of the expectation path that administration is giving to them. And as a school board chair, I said, one of the things we changed our motto is that this is around student success, is that if the student doesn't succeed, period, then we haven't done our job. And very few people really get that concept or get that idea. There's even people debunking the concept of learning styles. And I remember getting in an argument with another professor. He said, I don't believe those things exist. And research to show that. So hang on, I have 2 kids. I'm going to tell you from personal experience, they exist and they're real. And if you think they're not because of your quote unquote research study, you go ahead. But you are dishonoring the kids. Also, there's different teaching styles. So, part of instructors being responsible is, that's why we created this program. Why don't you teach the way that I learn? Because it's the responsibility of the teacher for people to learn. It's not the responsibility of the learner to capture it. I'm the adult. I'm the person that's trying to give you information. Most classes are compliant to our introverted model, meaning we created a word called citability. So introverted people in our model, which is, again, the orientation to the environment, biologically, they have more citability. So what does education want in the current format in the developed world? It wants compliance. Don't move, don't talk, don't whatever. So if I'm extroverted, I actually have to move to learn. I need to interact to learn. What does the system want? It doesn't want me to do it. So this is where, hey, by the way, I was at the principal's office more than once, Art. It hurt. That was when there was still, the strap was still there, right? And because I was having fun, I was enjoying myself. So I wasn't dissimilar to my son, though my son is even more sort of gregarious and outgoing than I am as far as the people side. But the reality is the system is really set up for many styles to fail. And why should we be shocked at that we're not really honoring the diversity even within our own education system?
Boy, there's so much that I not only agree with, but it just gets my brain going. So many issues.
Well, Art, I suppose I even stand here, and I'm just, for those of you that are listening, and I don't necessarily apologize, but we have covered a lot of different topics. And, I never would have thought here at my age now, 30 years into this profession, that I would have written all that content in, I conduct our certification for our assessments for other professionals. You don't need certification to use them, but I've been doing that now for 15 years. And it's almost like this is what I do every day. And that's why it's sort of on the top of my head. And it's a passion that we believe in developing the whole person. And so any single assessment or any sort of single area is not really honoring the diversity. So your health and wellness, I'm a wellness coach as well and have a diploma in nutrition and genetics. And a lot of times now in the developed world, we're sick. We're eating processed foods. We're having sugar. Kids are acting out because they're not healthy. They can't concentrate because of that. They don't work out. So again, their adrenaline levels and their health levels, it makes them less able to concentrate. They have these dopamine highs from social media and on their phone, and now they can't. They have ADHD because of the devices. not because they were born that way. And then I have my personal style, and what is it? And do I honor it? And then what are my core values? And can I be? So we look at all my self-worth levels. So all of these work together really to develop the whole person rather than any single component. You know, if you go to your car, there's lots of different components. There's the tires, there's the engine, there's all the brake system, all these different things that need to run together perfectly so that it will function. Why wouldn't we treat ourselves the same way?
I mean, I'm really honored that I had you on, because I think this is really, really helpful to the audience that I have. And I'm going to encourage them. And we're running out of time. And I wanted to give you at least 5 or so minutes to give us your closing thoughts and ideas, and where they can get a hold of you, what your website is, you know, all the details.
Well, I'm going to give a free gift to everybody. So you'll go to my speaker site. And so we have several different sites. So Ken Keis is spelled KENKEIS.com/expectations. And so at that hidden URL, we're going to be able to give you a free copy of my book, The Quest for Purpose, as a download. And so you can look at that. And then, you know, we have wiredtomorelikeme.com, which is the book that we've been talking about, personalities and the different styles. So when I think about all that we've talked about, Art, again, first of all of us, I believe that everybody here is for a reason. That it's a positive reason. Everybody has a purpose. But the responsibility to live my life is with every single person listening to this show. You know, if my life isn't going in the direction that I want it to, you can't blame anybody else except for yourself. Yes, we've all had stuff happen. You know, didn't even talk about it. My girlfriend, when I was in my 20s, early 20s, was murdered by a friend of mine. So all of us have our story about traumatic events that happen. So we can't, yes, we learn from that, but we want to be able to move forward. So every single person has purpose. If you don't know your purpose, then your purpose is to find your purpose. The other one is, I was interviewing and working with Richard Bowles, who wrote the book, What Color's Your Parachute? And I said, why are there so many people miserable? And Richard, and he was 80-something at that time, and he said to me, he's now passed away. He said, Ken, because people have not been willing to do the work. I spent weeks and months, and in fact years, just sort of refining my direction in life, just as you have, Art. At 63, you could have quit. You could have. You said, now my life partner who I love is gone. You could have quit. But no, you still are making a difference. I always joke that Moses was 80 before his first real job. So you haven't even gone close to start it. So as part of this, every single person listening to this, you matter. Every single person, you need to do the work to get clear. If you are unclear, that is your work. And then seek out coaches and professionals who know what they're talking about, who have expertise to be able to help you with this journey, just as Mike McManus helped me way back in 1989. And then different coaches over the years. I've been to hundreds and hundreds of hours of training, and I have a podcast that I listen to, or several actually, every single day. It's how I can sort of consume learning as part of it. So be committed to developing yourself, to serving. Allow yourself to fail along the way. Figure out what you don't want to do. Take that off the list and move towards at a higher level of contribution so that you can feel fulfilled. Is life perfect? No. Is stuff still going to happen? Yes. But that doesn't matter. How could I have the majority of it really reflecting my call, my purpose, my passion, so that you can serve and support others, not from a self-centered point of view, but from a self-honoring point of view?
Those are powerful words right there. I mean, those are what I call difference makers. So everybody, just thank you, Dr. Ken, and just really, folks, I'm going to encourage you to get a hold of his books and start devouring this, because this is life-changing, and that's what we want to do. Thank you again, Dr. Ken. And
thank you, Art, and thank you for your work, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Just go make this all worthwhile by making a choice to do something.
That is it, a choice to do something. Become a doer. Become a doer. That's what I always say. A lot of people talk about it. Very few people go out and do it. So let's become doers, everybody. And let us get on with life and become doers all over the face of the earth.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.